Welcome, fans of Star Trek The Next Generation, to episode 5 of the Captain's Yacht, the podcast that takes you on a tour of the next generation, episode by episode. Join us as we board the Captain's Yacht for a 3-episode excursion into TNG's first season, including the episodes Datalore, Angel 1, and 11001001. It's not going to be the last time I say that episode title today. I've got it memorized.
Bravo.
Yeah, I'm your host at ScholarBeta on all things social media, and I'm joined with my co-host and co-pilot, Captain Kanaka. Welcome, friend.
Welcome. Glad to be here. And bravo again for correctly enunciating that binary title. My gosh, I'm just glad that there aren't any other episodes just like that.
Yeah, honestly, that might be the most difficult one. We'll find out. We're going through this episode by episode. We'll report back. Just want to let the audience know again that this is a podcast put together by 2 teachers, designed as an experiment into how to do a podcast. Our goal is to jump right in, teach students it's okay to fail. I just want to acknowledge last week we had a little bit of an audio fail, trying a different recording mechanism. It didn't work, but that's the whole point. That's the whole point. So we learn, we move on. And I don't know about you, Captain, but I'm having a great time doing this. And I know way more about podcasting a month in than I did a month before. You and I, we were even talking algorithms in our pre-episode and post-episode meeting. So we're really getting into it.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, definitely. And the applications of this, both in your background, which is English language arts and literature, and my background as in studies and history. Lots of different applications here. I'm excited to see how this unfolds for kids. So with that in mind, I just want to thank the commenters again and people who are giving a lot of feedback. Thank you so much for that. We do have some things coming soon. There is a special episode that we are doing in which we examine the CBS All Access episode series, Star Trek Picard. We are planning that with meticulous detail to make sure we get it right. So we're looking forward to having a lot of dialogue on that, both between the resident scholar and I and the rest of you. Other things, folks, if there's anything else you'd like for us to review, we can definitely do that. So with that in mind, ScholarBeta, are you ready to start our first episode?
I think so. Shall we load up the transporter?
Awesome. Energize.
All right, my friends, here we go. Episode 13, Datalore, taking place on Stardate 41242.4. So what's going on in this episode, Captain? This is a data episode, and the premise that we're working with is Data returns to his home world of Omicron Theta for the first time since being rescued by Starfleet, where he discovers a nearly identical yet flawed android twin of his named Lore. To me, this falls right in line with classic Star Trek. I'm saying space anomaly. I'm actually technically categorizing Lore as a space anomaly and the crystalline entity that we get a little bit later. So to me, this is a classic. We're moving through space. All of a sudden, we discover, and then the rest of the episode. So one of my favorite types of Trek episodes. What else is like some tropes I like to think about with this episode is the acting for 2 and playing your own twin. That's Brett Spiner playing both Lieutenant Commander Data and Lore. Also the evil twin trope. You know, that's something that sounds really cliche, and it is, but it really pretty much works nicely in this. We definitely get an evil twin in Star Trek. It's not going to be the last evil twin we get. It's great. I love that trope, even though it's a little corny. And then finally, the last kind of thing that I'm thinking about with this episode in terms of very recognizable tropes out of television shows is nobody listens to the kid. You know, Wesley has it figured out. Wesley has it figured out in probably Act 3. You know, and nobody listens to him, and to their demise. You know, luckily they get out of it. You know, but nonetheless, that's the genre and tropes we're working with. Like I said, this is a Data episode. One of my favorite characters. I'm excited to get talking about this. What's happening behind the scenes, Captain?
So the finished product of this episode dramatically differs from its original inception. The original concept involved Lore actually being a female android and serve that this hypothetical female android would serve as a love interest for Data.
Oh.
Yeah, her job would be to handle dangerous situations that would normally kill human beings, and this would open up discussions over love and android rights and things along those lines. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, but that fell through. Brent Spiner had a different idea. The female android thing, it's worth noting, is going to be revisited in the third season with the episode The Offspring. But in that scenario, the female android was his daughter, not a love interest. Yet a different version of this episode was called Apocalypse Anon, which involved Riker falling in love with a female away team member named Minuet, which is going to be brought
Mm.
up again in another episode we review this go around.
That's right.
Then he finds out that the person to whom he's attracted is an android. So again, widely different. You can definitely see the artificial intelligence, artificial life form tropes and motifs here. But it all comes down to Brent Spiner pitching an idea for Data running into his evil twin, and the writers liked that, and the writers went with it.
Wow.
So,
Hey, let's talk about that for a second. What do you think about the female android to serve as Data's love interest? Is that a Maurice Hurley idea? Or is
uh,
that, do we have any idea where that comes from, or
in
do we
terms
like
of
this idea?
in terms of documentation, it's probably not a Maurice Hurley idea because Gene Roddenberry is credited as the teleplay writer.
Got it. Okay.
So I'm not sure if that's a Maurice Hurley idea or not. I'd have to take a look into that some more. Maybe in a follow-up episode we can bring that up. But that they're attempting to expand on character, which is good. Each of these episodes in their own way expand on characters, which I will always maintain is where classic Trek is better than new Trek on that.
Yeah.
But right now you're dealing with this is okay. So we're dealing with halfway through season one, and around halfway through season one, Gene Roddenberry is going to leave.
Oh,
He
yes.
goes on a vacation to Tahiti with his wife Majel, and that's when Hurley takes over full time, and everything falls down, and actually production stops. And we see an inkling of that in one of the episodes we're going to be examining today.
Nice.
So
Okay. I love all
that's
these ideas for the script, and I'm glad that they eventually kind of make them into later Trek. No female android for Data, but Lol in The Offspring. I love that episode. I
oh
can't wait to
yeah.
get to that. And then even Riker falling in love with someone who's AI. We don't exactly get that, but Riker has some definitely interesting love people he falls in love with throughout the series,
Oh yeah.
and there's multiple of them for sure. And then also we get that kind of with Data's mom being an android-esque,
Mhm.
much later. So yeah, we'll get there. It's great to see though that they're keeping track of these ideas and that they will come back. So
Oh yeah.
should we talk a little bit about what's working in this episode? Where Data has a homecoming and meets his evil twin Lore. What's
Definitely.
positive about this? What's working as a story and as an episode for you?
So what works for me is that this is a proper Data episode. You get to see more or less a day in a life of Data and his backstory, which I think is extremely important. And you will see more of that in a later episode called Data's Day. But
Yeah.
this is where Data as a character and how he operates and how he thinks comes full focus to me. And being a person on the autistic spectrum, that this is one of my favorite episodes. It is not a perfect episode. I grant you that. There are so many frustrating details, which even to this day make my head hurt. But the connection between Data and the autistic spectrum comes into full focus for me in this episode. Again, I've said this in previous episodes before. I'm not sure whether they went for that and whether that was their intention, but Data resonates a lot for me being on the spectrum based off of what he does. And I've actually picked up, as I'm going to explain in a second, some of the things that he does in my daily life. So Data spends his time mimicking human behaviors, which is something that being on the spectrum, I do rather frequently. I did it a lot when I was a kid, and even to this day. For example, with parent-teacher conferences coming up, certain mannerisms that I do. I study Picard's mannerisms, and I anticipate various kinds of, if a kid's failing, if a kid's succeeding and stuff like that, using Picard and adapting Picard's mannerisms and voice inflections to handle those given situations. And then in the shower, this is called echolalia, where you are exposed to something and then you repeat it over and over again. Data does it. I learned to do it through data, and that turns out to be a common coping mechanism for people on the spectrum. In a different angle, in a different direction, 7 of 9 does this too in Voyager.
Yeah, good connection.
And yeah, when we do our Picard review, I want to definitely talk about how they could have expanded that with her character, especially considering statistically, people on the spectrum who are female are statistically lower than people who are male being diagnosed. And I think they would have, I think they were going for something very poignant in that direction. And then Picard struggled with it a little bit. So that's the deal there. Brent Spiner's facial tics, all those sorts of things. You see it, you see somebody else doing it, and you mimic it, and you mimic it, and you mimic it. That's something that data does. That's something that I did growing up, and to a certain extent still do in my professional capacity. Backfire to this growing up using extremely large multisyllabic words.
Yeah.
Because you're using data and to a lesser degree Picard to model communication. Didn't make many friends growing up with my classmates told me I sounded like I swallowed a dictionary. So what are your opinions on this, ScholarBeta?
Yeah, I appreciate that insight into Data's mannerisms, because when I first looked at this, one of the things I was thinking about was, Data already seems more human than a lot of the people, a lot of the crew that we actually get to meet and interact with. In some ways, he's figured out humanity incredibly well. And at my first read was kind of like, oh, maybe him trying to learn how to sneeze and such. That's sort of him working through the superficial parts of being human. But actually, after thinking about it right now and chatting with you, that's hardly, that body language is core to being able to communicate, which is core to being able to interact with another human being. So, no, I really think that's a fascinating layer I hadn't really considered with Data. Yeah, just like you mentioned, this is a proper Data episode, or it's as close as we're going to get for a minute. And I do like it too. To me, they spent some money on this episode. I mean that in more than one way. So they spent some money in the fact that we got numerous sets. We got the world of Omicron Theta. We got the lab. We got some hallways and some interiors and like a hidden bunker where they find lore. They spent some money. They put some sets together for this. And but in another way, I mean that this is a great investment in Spiner Data, who is really going to carry the series. It's going to be a huge part. When people think of TNG, they think of Picard, they think of Data, they think of maybe Worf, sometimes Whoopi Goldberg and Guinan. Who can say, But yeah, he really carries a ton of this, and them putting in this investment into the story and doing a good job with it is pretty amazing, I think. So we do learn a bunch of basic things about Data, which is awesome. We learn that he just kind of woke up on Omicron Theta. He was found by Starfleet, and then his life went on from there. We learn that Data is not alone, that lore exists, and he was created before Data. We also learn for the first time about Noonien Soon. Thanks for correcting my spelling on that one. I think that was you. I thank you. I have to always go to Memory Alpha. I take notes as quickly as possible, and then I hit up Memory Alpha to try to fix them. But I don't always get to it. Yeah, what's up, my friend?
I only remember the way you spell Dr. Noonien Soong is because Soong's first name is Khan's middle name, which I always I always thought that was strange.
Yeah, I have another blank in here for my notes about the crew that Data was found by.
Tripoli.
Tripoli. I was going to say, I feel like at one point I had that information definitely stored away, but unlike Data, my memory is not perfect. Okay, so the final thing that we learn about Data, and I want to ask you about this, is that he has the capacity to save human memories within him. A couple questions. Does this make sense to you? Does this have bigger implications? And does it ever come up again? What do you think about this point?
So the ability to take human memories, they say in the episode that this served as a foundation for him to operate as a sentient life form. There is a line that says that. And as a person on the spectrum, I definitely understand that. There's something that I've written. I wrote it about 10 years, no, more like 15 years ago, which talks about my time on this, my experiences on the spectrum. And I've developed something that I call a social matrix, where you take the behaviors and the voice inflections of all these different people you've observed. And depending on the situation, if you see something that pulls up, for example, like I bring up parent-teacher conferences again, an upset parent, the body language is very similar to an upset colonist that Picard might handle. So that becomes a telltale for me to go, okay, use Picard behavior modality XYZ. And this becomes the norm for me until adolescence, until Star Trek Nemesis. And then because that movie completely destroyed the Star Trek universe for me, I branched out from there. Oh yeah. We need to review Nemesis, because I need to explain how that damaged my psyche. So, but I branched out from Star Trek at that point. That was a pivotal point in my development on the spectrum. And then I began to borrow from other characters that were sci-fi adjacent or action adjacent. ScholarBeta.
I'm just thinking that what happened to you in Nemesis and what happened to me with Generations. Yeah, we'll get into it. When we make those reviews, but I'm saying something really changed in me, and I had to kind of walk away from the series for a second after watching Generations and just thinking, dang, that hurts. That really hurts, anyways, hey, I love your note about the fact. I'm sorry. Yeah, you had another thought on this.
So very quickly, you asked about this coming up again and how he
exactly. I love your note on this.
This does come back in the season 5 episode Silicon Avatar, where the same crystalline entity comes back.
Yep.
And a relative of one of the victims, named Dr. Marr, wants to destroy it. Very well done episode. I'm looking forward to reviewing that. Data uses the memory of Dr. Marr's son to try to dissuade her from killing the crystalline entity. And then at the end, it's kind of bittersweet. And it's very well done. So in terms of functionality, again, this is one of those data autistic spectrum sort of things where it makes sense from that angle. And over the course of my development, I do that in my daily life, but also it serves a purpose storytelling wise. It does come up again 4 seasons later in season 5. So
I guess that is just also to say that all those little seeds that I just talked about, that you just elaborated on too, him being found by the Tripoli, lore, Noonien Soong, having access to other people's memories, they all come up in other episodes later. That's actually some great continuity that they sow in this episode that definitely pays off later. And again, some of the best episodes in this series are all about data and follow up on some of these ideas. Brothers, one of my favorite episodes, just comes to mind immediately. So anyways, I just think this episode is so cool for me because all of the investment that pays off later, all the things that are established here, just really bloom later and makes Data an amazing character. So great setup there. And then, so I want to talk a little bit about my read on Data for just a bit. I'm conflicted on this whole thing about being human or striving to be human, and we'll get to that in a bit. But so Data has really amazing gifts, and I would say greater gifts than almost any human has, right? He is basically immortal. He has near infinite knowledge. He does not eat or sleep. He has a photographic memory. He's fully functional. I mean, who's fully functional for eternity? But I mean, he's godlike. This guy is basically, he has it all, and he is what humans are striving to be, and ironically, he is striving to be human. I feel like do you read an irony there, or am I looking too much into that?
I have my own perspective based off of my own perspective of Data. I don't know if it's appropriate to talk about this now or towards the end, but I do have some thoughts about that. But you mentioned something about Picard's use of, shall we say, pronouns in dealing with Data.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll
So
talk. Yeah, we can get there in just a second. But okay, I'm thinking that like Data to me is really the ideal merging of technology and humanity. Like that's what he represents to me. He has all those positive qualities, and he already learns them throughout the series. Like the Enterprise is the ideal piece of machinery, the ideal piece of technology. Picard is like the ideal human leader, and like Data kind of represents the merging of those two. He's right in the middle. I feel like when I'm reading the connection between these various important characters and settings in TNG. So to me, he is a very Roddenberry character. You
oh
know,
yeah,
he's as Roddenberry as Spock, in my opinion. You
yes.
know, in an interesting way. And again, all I've got to say is that I love the idea. I love what Roddenberry has introduced with Data, and I just think that again, that I've said it enough that the investment in his character and what happens in this episode just all really just some of the most interesting stuff in Trek. Um, yeah, like
Definitely.
my last thing I will say there from my note is that yeah, Picard's acknowledgement of mishumanizing, that's kind of the term I was thinking of, you know, kind of equivalent somehow to misgendering. I'm not sure exactly, but he mishumanizes Datalore by calling them it. And his reaction to Data's feedback about no, my pronoun is he, is actually way ahead of time. Like he's way ahead of the curve in my opinion on that. What's your read on that?
The read on the term "it" or the read on
Yeah, and how
Data.
Picard handles that feedback. Yeah.
Well, I think considering we're talking once again about 1970 and excuse me 1987 America, the
Yeah.
idea that he, as you call it, mishumanizes or mischaracterizes Data, and how he graciously corrects himself is something that's very much ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Because we, especially considering where we live in an extremely liberal city where that sort of thing is common. You go out to rural areas, it's not as common as it is where we live. Um, that again, the fact that this is going out on a mainstream 1987 television show is very much ahead of its time there, and it shows the grace that Picard has as a person because he doesn't dig in his heels the way a Bruce Maddox would,
Yeah.
and insist on calling it and calling Data and Lore, who are not technically organic life forms, it again. Perseverating on that definitely shows Picard's grace and flexibility as a leader, and we definitely need something like that these days, it seems.
Yeah, I think this is even the first time where Picard I'm pretty sure they're in the observation lounge says that humans are machines as well, just a different type, you know? So I
Oh yeah.
think, again, Picard has a very great read and perspective on this. Yeah, which could directly contrast with the next point I want to talk about what doesn't work. And it's unfortunately a
Oh yeah.
Picard point. Can we get there? You ready
Yeah,
to transfer to that?
make it so. Go ahead.
I really hate the Shut Up, Wesley. I'm not sure if it was supposed to be played for a joke or if it was. I'm not really sure what the intent was because Gates McFadden says it later, so I guess that's supposed to be a joke, you know? But to me, now we're swinging back to Picard is no good with children. And this feels like a really dramatic shift away. He just promoted Wesley a few episodes ago, and I feels like this is just a symptom of having different writers on season one. He says he's no good with children, then he lets Wesley fly the ship, then he makes Wesley an acting ensign, then he tells him to shut up. Would he tell any other ensign like Leffler to shut up? I don't know, my friend. I really dislike that moment. I know it's a meme and people think it's funny, but to
Yeah.
me, that is just some bad writing. Do you got a take on that? You have a thought on that?
It's considering his situation, it's difficult to gauge there because they are trying to go back to the well and keeping in mind that Roddenberry is credited with writing the teleplay, just like he was credited for writing Encounter at Farpoint, where that concept was brought up
Yeah,
in the
great
first
point.
place. Maybe it's an attempt to re-examine Picard's flaw as a character. And it is a joke, I think. Whether it was intended to be one or not, I'm leaning more towards it intending to be a joke because it becomes a recurring gag. It doesn't hit the full comedy 3. Actually,
Yeah,
it does. It
it
does.
does. It does. Yeah.
Because Picard says it, Dr. Crusher says it, on the bridge immediately after Picard says it, and then she says it again at Data's quarters. So it does hit that classic rule of three. So maybe that's what it was supposed to be. So it's one of those things. Okay, they bring it up. It's his flaw. You know, you can't have perfect characters because they're not interesting. So that doesn't
like Data, for example, who is a perfect character and is interesting. I'm just saying.
You and I are going to differ on that a lot.
Okay, awesome.
But with that in mind, that's my deal. Your discussion about Data and lore. What do you have there?
Okay, so I think my only big point about lore right now, and I want you to kind of go through, I like some of your thinking around some of the inconsistencies around when they introduce lore. I want to talk about those, but my big thing about lore is it definitely seems like this episode, they wrapped it up really fast. And my only question is, lore's just floating out there in space right now? You know what I'm saying? They went to this effort to discover him, to reassemble him, you know, and then the episode just really abruptly ends. And I'm wondering, is that all crystalline entity stuff that they had to put in there that, you know, that took up time and they couldn't, kind of explore what happened to lore? But it just feels very rushed at the end. But I actually also see that it's kind of an advantage because now they can bring him back and do other things with him, right? I get both of those. A symptom of the television format, in my opinion.
So my perspective on that is this whole thing was an experiment, depending on how many people would react to lore being the evil twin. They wrote it in such a way where if the audience did not react to him positively, he died. And there's a very built-in organic way to say that lore died. You know, Poochie died on his way to his home planet, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
But you also have, and there is, next time we see lore, they do make mention of that.
Yes,
of how he survived. Yep, the Packlids, which is a season 2 thing, and I'm looking forward to that, old boy.
Yep.
So with that said, I'm not terribly bothered with how they handled that. They knew they were going with a cliche with the evil twin that could either make or break the episode, make or break the character. So you don't want to commit, especially with a first season. So they did it was an elegant solution that could have gone both ways. And because people reacted so positively or generally positively to lore, he comes back a couple more times. Definitely. And actually plays a role in a very interesting, one of my favorite as an historical document episodes, which is Descent, because there was a very specific historical reason why they wrote that episode. With that said, what doesn't work for me about this episode is another theme that's going to come up again in another episode at the end of our time together today, which is the small details. If you think about them really hard, they completely unravel the story.
Let's go over them. Hit them.
Yeah, so the inhabitants of Omicron Theta, that colony, took the time to disassemble lore. So you think there'd be a log entry explaining why he was disassembled. But there's... but if they did...
warning.
Yep, a warning, exactly. Also, why did they put lore in an elaborate stasis chamber instead of a disposal or refuse area? Kind of similar to what they did with B4 in Star Trek Nemesis. Were they planning on repairing lore? But I thought that's what Data's purpose was. You argue that you made the statement, and I guess this is the accepted narrative, that Data was built first and then lore was, or the other way around. Lore is an unreliable narrator, but his excuses for lying about being human or being made first don't make any sense.
Yes.
Why would the colonists be envious? I thought about this when I first saw this episode 20 years ago, and I think about it now, or over 20 years ago, I think about it now. So, does that mean lore will eventually... I wrote these jokes down because I was getting punchy and I needed a laugh this week. Does that mean lore will eventually go through puberty? Does that mean lore will eventually get tired one morning and call in sick for work? Also, I get that Dr. Soong made the perfect human android replica. He's a genius, but the fact that he made a perfect human replica on his first try kind of makes him a quote unquote Mary Sue, can do anything, perfect person. Really small nitpick, but it's implied that Lore understands humor and therefore has a basic grasp of emotions. But in later episodes, he pines for emotions and wants things like Dr. Soong's emotion chip, which you would think he'd already have or shouldn't have a need for.
Yeah.
Also, really small thing is established that the Enterprise computer is able to differentiate Lore from Data. Worf says as much before Yar asks, how much do you trust Data now? So since he isolates Lore and Data, you would think that they'd be able to unmask Lore as an imposter for Data after he incapacitates him. But again, you think too much into it, the story collapses. Lore's plan to blow up a tree next to the crystalline entity, that is so laughably bad. And the fact that they humor him, they humor him in the slightly humor, and they go, okay, do your thing, but I'm not sure about this. This doesn't smell right. Demonstrates that the crew doesn't have good judgment there. So I wrote in my joking comments here, is the Psi 2000 virus still around? Finally, didn't they learn from Khan back in the original series that you shouldn't give mysterious civilians who turn out to be evil unrestricted access to the ship, because they do that for the act break. So those are the big things that I have for this. So I know you got some other things, ScholarBeta, so make it so.
The only other okay, so I want to establish, are we saying that Data was built before Lore? Because my understanding and what I was kind of just looking up, that it definitely went Lore then Data, right? Or do we need to fact check that right now?
It's one of those things where that seems to be the accepted norm, but given that Lore is an unreliable narrator, it could go both ways.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they break that down in Brothers, but I think that's the unreliable narrator part is interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. And I was thinking about that emotion chip. I remember that emotion chip having something to do with like upgrades, right? He learned some things from Lore, worked on the emotion chip. That's why he activated Data to come home so he could update him and give him like the final product, so to speak. A software update that you can't patch over Wi-Fi. Gotta still be hard drive. Okay, so I know maybe if we don't have time to break this down right now, we can save this for another Data episode because there are many excellent ones. But my big question is,
okay.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, if you're going to say what I think you're saying, please do it, because I do have a rebuttal to this. So
absolutely. Let's chat this up. My question is, why does Data strive to be more human when he arguably surpasses him? That's what I was alluding to earlier. Basically, I understand like there's differences between, physical, biological, mental, cultural aspects of humanity. I get that those can be separated out, that he has some and that he lacks others entirely. And I think this question comes up actually throughout the series, and I'm pretty sure that Lore makes the argument first, and then Q will in later seasons, especially when Q becomes human. So, what do you think about that? Why not strive to be Vulcan, or why not strive to be anything else? What's your read on that? You think it's a storytelling purpose? You think there's a different purpose?
There's a couple different purposes from my perspective, given my quote-unquote relationship with Data as a character. I see so much of my life experience in Data, in the sense that you have great skills, borderline superhuman skills on one angle, but quote-unquote deficiencies in another angle. And you have somebody, you're asking, why does Data not want to be Vulcan? Because physically he's human. He is built in the image of a human. He has some superhuman abilities, but at the same time, you need to have that kind of belonging. And on top of that, he has these modalities built into his brain that are human in origin. He has human memories. Those human memories serve as the foundation for him to operate in any given situation. That's the reason why they're there. again, seeing the similarities between myself and Data. Growing up, my nickname, actually, my dad called me Data because I had insensitivity to pain. I'll never forget this, but when I tried out for football one year in middle school, I broke my collarbone and kept playing for 45 minutes. And
Wow.
that's the sort of thing that Data would do, that sort of thing. Superior physical strength, quote unquote, superior physical strength. My dad would, I grew up on a cattle ranch, and I would be doing all the heavy lifting there. I have all these different advantages that, ironically or coincidentally, similar to what Data has. But if you were to ask me to dance, which Data can't do, and I sure as heck can't do, if you're going to ask me to sing, which Data does at the very end of his life,
Yes.
those sorts of aspects of being human, you want to be accepted. You want, because you look like everybody else, you want to feel like everybody else and be accepted by everybody else. And given the analytical aptitude that you have, you want to examine how and why you do that. So, and at the end of Data's life, he talks about wanting to improve himself, aspiring to be better than what you are. Data doesn't know what a joke is at the beginning of his life, or the beginning of our television relationship with him. At the end, he does. That sort of growth, those sorts of goals, that's why Data resonates with me so much on the spectrum, is because he takes so much time reading into the things in which he's quote unquote deficient, the same way I do or did growing up. So that's my little point on Data. So we're getting close to overtime.
Can I just a couple, just two more things? I know the transporter chief wants us out of here, but okay, yeah, I'm with you on that. And I don't, of course, I don't want to discount your relationship with the character by any means. That's incredibly important. No. And the fact that these guys are around for 176 episodes, we grow with these folks and movies and etc. And crossover episodes. We really grow with these folks, and there's some serious identification there. I guess just looking at it from a different perspective, I'm thinking like, you can do anything. Mm-hmm. Why would you limit yourself to humanity, which is pretty flawed and presently on trial in the context of this series? One. And two, Picard can't dance either, my friend. Don't worry. It's not just an android thing. I can't dance either. I had to take swing dance lessons to even feel like remotely confident moving my left and right feet in different directions. I'm just messing with you on that one.
I get it, but I just have a rebuttal to that.
Yes, of course.
Given my experience on the spectrum, I don't want to say people on the spectrum, but they don't see it that way. It's absolute. Yeah. It's binary. It's people do this and you can't. So that's that sort of incentive there. His creators are human. His memories are human. The lens through which he understands the world is human. Therefore, he aspires to go that way as opposed to something else. That's my point there, which very similar to what I did growing up. That's why Data means a lot to me, and that's why when they did what they did with him in Nemesis, it completely broke my psyche and went through a really weird time. And it's crazy because we're talking about a person who doesn't technically exist.
It's true, but is an amazing character, as we've talked about.
So with that in mind,
we can move. We'll keep talking about Data as we go.
I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to that. So first, some facts. As you pointed out, dear scholar, the first "Shut Up, Wesley" line is uttered in this movie, or rather episode, for Trek Firsts and Facts. This is technically a last, but this is one of the last episodes of Star Trek ever, in which Gene Roddenberry is the credited writer for the teleplay. Yep, he's accused of ghostwriting several other episodes, but in terms of credited work, this is his last one before he passed away. In terms of episode awards, my thing is this episode award is consistency. What's that? Which is an award given for a story detail or character action that is inconsistent with what is previously established or what will happen in the future. It's established that Data cannot use contractions yet after
Yep.
lore is built and beamed into space. Yep.
Yep.
Data very clearly says "I'm" as a contraction. My first copy of Star Trek: The Next Generation on DVD credits it as "I'm." That's how it's subtitled. You could think that he's saying "I am." I listened to it really closely when I rewatched it, and he clearly says "I'm." So my initial reaction was that twist ending to the Thriller music video, because I was expecting at the end, the very end of the episode, for Data to turn to the camera with crazy eyes and have Vincent Price laugh. And as a sort of switcheroo, saying it's not, they didn't get Data, they got Data. So he clearly uses a contraction, but it's never used again. So that's my deal there. You want to do interiors, ScholarBeta?
Yeah, there's two that are beautiful. One, in this, we get Data's quarters. We'll be spending some time here throughout the series. I looked in the script; it was supposed to be described as incredibly Spartan with a supercomputer mounted, and that's basically what we get. So we get a couple things. Like I say, we'll be back here on numerous occasions, but yeah, he has his own master systems display and super desk over there. So I appreciate that. And then the second, I had to figure out where this was. I searched the script up again, and where Lore is reassembled, when he's brought in those really cool blue tubes, and his limbs are floating in blue liquid. That's technically, according to the script, in sick bay, in a quote unquote special operating table, which I like to believe is, yes, somewhere close by. We never see it again, but it's somewhere. So yeah, there it is. Those are my Enterprise interiors. Love both of those spots, especially that sickbay special operating theater table, whatever you want to call it. All right.
Yeah, so that's the deal. They're really great episode, really personal episode for me. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. A lot of things frustrate me about it, but good episode all the way around. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Great episode about an amazing character. Yeah, let's do it. Reset it.
Wonderful. So let's get into our next one. Yeah, we beamed twice. All right.
Oh, nice.
Nice. So whenever you're ready, let's do Angel 1.
Well, all I have to say before we start is, unfortunately, this isn't a Data episode. You know what I mean? It's not. So I think this will go a little bit faster. My friend, I'm so glad that you love Data as much as I do, if more. We have a competition sometimes. Who loves on Data more? What a great character! Just the character that made me love the show. Obviously Picard too, but dang, I really like that other character. Really brilliant.
Oh yeah.
Okay, let's hit it. We cheat a little bit. We're actually technically in episode 14 of the first season, Angel 1, happening on stardate 41636.9. Let's talk the premise. Premise is, while searching for survivors of a human ship, not Federation, the Enterprise encounters a matriarchal society that isn't exactly cooperative, but isn't exactly hostile until the last 5 minutes. Meanwhile, back on the Enterprise, everybody is getting sick from a mysterious virus. 2020 is calling again. Quickly. Genre, I'm going to call this a political thriller, I guess. I don't really know. A pandemic thriller. It's kind of split. Okay, and I just want to talk about this trope for a second. Matriarchal societies. My friends, if you can write a matriarchal society, you should be a published author, because it is one of the hardest tropes to fulfill in a way that doesn't come off as, look at these women acting like men, capitalist men, so to speak, imperialist, colonialist men. You know what I'm saying? It's just really hard to write a matriarchal society and make it unique and not just switch the gender roles, in my opinion. And I've actually listened to like Brandon Sanderson and company talk about this, and it is hard. It's tough. It's actually a great writing exercise. Really makes you evaluate what you believe if you're a male, or, what you believe about women if you're writing this matriarchal society. Yeah, it's a great but totally difficult to master trope. And I'd say like the only other one I can think of is like Drow Society and kind of early Dungeons and Dragons, and it's not done exactly well there either, in my opinion. I mean, it's cool, but it's not exactly, original or super unique. But anyways, that's kind of the main trope we're working with here. There's like a pie in the face gag where Picard gets hit with a snowball coming off the turbo lift. And that usually wouldn't be important. I wouldn't mention that, but it actually kicks off the B plot, which is kind of crazy and disjointed from the rest of the episode. So, my friend, take us behind the scenes of Angel One. What's going on in the writer's room, in Roddenberry's head in the production office with this thing?
So this idea was spawned from a conversation Gene Roddenberry and Herbert J. Wright had at a story meeting in which they wanted to give sexism the quote-unquote apartheid treatment. Roddenberry voices some really interesting views concerning gender dynamics in the United States. Some are extremely progressive and complimentary, some not so much. And again, there's... we can definitely, if we ever do a special episode on Roddenberry's legacy, we can examine that some more. I mentioned that production on season 1 gets some difficulties. This production on this episode in particular came to a screeching halt because when the day came to film the script, there was no script. And they they're actually, even the completed scripts bore dramatic differences from the finished product. They literally patched this episode together on the fly. The Romulans...
and it feels like it.
Yeah. The Romulans are actually Ferengi in the script. This was their last attempt to make the Ferengi dangerous. There were 7 battle cruisers surrounding the Federation outpost. They're supposed to be Ferengi, but they're Romulan on the script. I think that's just one of those things where they just gave up on the Ferengi. There's a subplot where a character by the name of Mistress Di tries to seduce Data as he attempts to study the history of Angel One. The attempt at seduction goes right over Data's head. It's attempted to go for comedy.
More Data in the bedroom, no thank you.
Exactly. So I'm glad they didn't. Well, okay, So
yeah, sorry.
It's good that it's not even there. You want to play it for laughs, that's one thing, but it's probably good that that wasn't there at all. The colonists and the fellow survivors that they're talking about, they're not hiding in this version of the script. Also, it's more obvious that Dr. Crusher takes command of the illness, and the fact that she commanded the Enterprise during the illness because of the illness. That's in the script more emphasized. I actually appreciate that it's more understated. But that's definitely a detail there. Also, a little bit of history here. After production wrapped for this episode, Paramount announced that the show was renewed for a second season.
Wow.
So,
yeah. Okay. Based on these 14, there are these 13 episodes. Okay.
Yep.
Dope. I like that.
So, in terms of what works in this episode for me, because there's a lot that doesn't.
Let's hit it.
That doesn't. There are a few sincere attempts at gender progressivism by 1980 standards. Worf makes a comment that "quote unquote" Klingons appreciate strong women, but on the flip side of that, you later learn that women can't serve on the High Council because of old school patriarchy. So kind of fast and loose there.
And couldn't be captains too in the previous installation.
Maybe not the Klingons, but that was actually a Federation thing. That's what. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm derailing us. Keep going, my friend.
All good. Picard gives deference to Troy and allows her to introduce herself to Angel One. Also, the women take over positions that men usually do, and usually it's done in a understated way, which I think makes it work better. Lieutenant Wong, a female crew member, fills in for Geordi in fixing the ship. Really subtle. Geordi wants to go down there. Geordi's feeling sick. Somebody says Lieutenant Wong can do it. Yes, Worf says Lieutenant Wong can do it. She can do it, and he goes, "Oh, she can do it," and then stays back aboard. Dr. Crusher takes over the crew when I called it the space cold or space flu, but there's definitely parallels to a certain current infection that we can't talk about, otherwise we're going to get flagged on YouTube. So also I kind of got the vibe that this plays off of an old joke in sitcoms Roseanne and Big Bang Theory definitely come to mind of how men can't handle the flu. That is a
Oh, I did
tried
not
and
know that
true,
was even a trope. I gotta go
yeah,
look that up.
tried and true sitcom ingredient where the Roseanne, John Goodman, that hulking mass of humanity that he is, great affection for
Yep.
John Goodman, but he gets the flu and he's completely knocked out, and Roseanne has to take care of his stuff and her stuff. And again, it's a classic trope that they do, and it's right out of the handbook. But it's kind of interesting that they brought that up and put it in here in a way that kind of props up the themes. What works for you, ScholarBeta?
Okay, so I've got a question. Well, actually, let's get to that at the end. Okay, wait, what can we not talk about and we'll get flagged? Something that's happening right now?
A certain virus of unknown origin, the beer bug, as YouTubers call it. You can't talk about the beer bug.
Oh, we're gonna have
Yeah,
to talk about this. Do you see where I'm in the script? Am I okay to talk
yeah.
about that?
If you want to call it beer bug, that's fine. But they will
Oh,
target. Yeah, if you use the actual word, if we ever get
yeah.
monetized, they'll cut out our monetization for this video. So
Interesting. Oh, and I can't wait for that money to roll in. I have a house
there
to
you
buy.
go.
Anyways. Okay, so
Beer bug is
this,
okay. You can call it
yes,
beer
okay,
bug.
let's talk about this beer bug. Questions. Where is Beverly's mask? Why are they not sanitizing surfaces and quarantining the crew? Why not get non-infected crew to the battle bridge to command the ship?
Ooh,
This sounds like a negative, but without knowing about the beer bug, as we're calling it, I would never have thought of those things. So honestly,
yeah,
those all turn into positives. And then I think about positives things Beverly does. They don't blame the source. They work for a cure. Positive. They rapid test. Positive. They rely on science. They trust scientists and forgo wishful thinking. Positive. Like Picard doesn't stay on the bridge and say, "Don't worry, it's all going to go away." By the fourth act, it's all going to be disappeared. Nope. They continuously brief each other despite unfavorable and disheartening information. So, to be honest, all those things could very well be negatives in my mind, but because of current situations and the beer bug, now I notice all those things and I really appreciate this episode for that. I actually got to say, this B plot sounds like they had no idea how to make this episode 45 minutes, so they shoved this plot in there to round it out, and I actually like it way more than the main plot, to be perfectly honest.
well,
So yeah, that's why I'm putting it there.
and
Yes,
it
sir.
also serves a very subtle juxtaposition to how they do things down on the planet, Angel One.
Yeah.
Because the Enterprise becomes basically a mirror opposite or the inverse of Angel One, because all the women are able to take over the ship and run it, and it's one of those things where, again, it's really effective in its subtlety there. They don't have that talk or that argument, I can do it, which you definitely see in, if you were to pull that men can't handle the flu trope, that's the deal where, the man asks for something and, in this case, John Goodman asks for something, and Roseanne says, "Well, why can't you get it yourself? Men,
Yeah.
they baby everything." Da, 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 da. You don't see any of that. I think it works really well in how it's there, but they don't make a big deal out of it. And I definitely agree with you in the sense that they clearly added this to make it a 45-minute episode, and it's actually more interesting,
Yeah.
especially given modern times, than the A plot. So,
I wish. Okay, so that's one thing I want to talk just really quickly, if I could. Something that comes up with my kids all the time. They worship subtlety. They think
mhm.
subtlety is the greatest thing of all time. And I think, yeah, it can be. It can be. However, I think I would have rather seen a little more of a thematic connection, like a more overt thematic connection, because they actually put Geordi in charge of the Enterprise for a little while, which seems disjointed with, them trying to mirror the matriarchal society with the matriarchal running of the Enterprise or something like that. But then, of course, Geordi does eventually go down too. But he even has that moment where he sits in the captain's chair and, his hands go on the grips and the music swells. Dun, 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 dun. I think to like kind of give him his moment. I think they should just given that to Gates McFadden and maybe a little later in the episode, actually. And then maybe that would have made some sense to me. Yeah, what's your thinking on that?
The original version of the script emphasized that. In the original version,
Exactly.
were pages written in which they consciously discuss giving her command over the ship. And maybe I've never read these pages. I don't know what the script is. I think it works as it is. And again, they must be clairvoyant, because the events that happen in this script, in this episode on the Enterprise, are almost word for word what's happening in current events now with the beer bug.
Exactly. Okay, and so one more thing about that. I would much rather cut stuff from the surface of Angel 1
Oh,
and
yeah.
give more to the discussion of Beverly's what is not inheritance of the ship, Beverly's running, management, genius in finding the cure and keeping the Enterprise afloat or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have liked a little bit more there, but I think I like that you see that parallel between those two, because I just scratched my head thinking, what is the connection between these two? So nice.
No,
I love that view of subtlety you got there.
I live and die by the mantra that the difference between art and propaganda is complexity, and this is complex in the sense that it's extremely subtle, where it fuels conversations like what we're having. It's, did you see that?
Yeah,
And then we talk about it versus, oh, we heard that, now we move on. That's what makes it art. You sit there and you talk about it and you process it, and that fuels discussion.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, that in mind, what doesn't work for you, ScholarBeta?
Big picture, my friend, I'm thinking this is kind of more of that fantasy of the same vibe that I was talking with you about back when we were reviewing Justice,
Yep.
They all look like white people to me. There's some background characters that are slightly ambiguous, but they're like ambiguously white. You know what I'm saying? Not like ambiguously like darker skin tone or something like that. Like, no, it's pretty fantasy of the same. Was that because it's a rush script, like you said? They got there at the end, they're like, oh crap, we have no idea what to do, better just pull these actresses or these performers in and throw them in there, whoever we got. I don't know, I'm not sure what happens, but they were able to staff a starbase in 11001001 with a numerous diverse cast. So why couldn't they do that with the surface of Angel 1? I'm not sure. And this is the strangest battle of the sexes of all time. If that's even what it's kind of supposed to be, the sparring between Riker and the elected one. It's kind of like we got these strong women that fall into kind of pretty bad stereotypes,
Oh, yeah.
Like, what does the elected one do? Okay, so we have this woman who's leading the entire planet that's supposed to defy a stereotype, but she uses her sexual prowess to kind of seduce and charm Riker, and then kind of in that really terrible stereotype about women where they're unpredictable and have mood swings, then all of a sudden she's executing people, or trying to put them up into the disappearing laser and make them go away forever. Wasn't that the craziest execution chamber you've ever seen in your life?
Oh,
that was some strange stuff. I like that they took us right there into the chamber itself. So my last kind of thing on this, when I really zoom out and think about it, I'm thinking about, like, they call this an oligarchical constitution, but like, am I supposed to sympathize with oligarchs? Am I? So like, we got our oligarchs on one hand who discuss how they benefit from subjugating men. And then we have stubborn white romantic men, colonist types, on the other hand, who don't want to leave because they have a relationship with the indigenous people of this world. So, like, what side do I want to win there? I don't like any of these people, I feel like they all got some things they definitely got to work through. So, did you any feeling on that? Kind of the battle of the sexes, the stereotypes that we fall into there, the two parties that are warring on the surface. Did you feel sympathetic for them? What's your read on that?
This episode has a lot of laughs. It's one of those things where it's like they flip the script, and this kind of ties into my deal here, where they go into really archaic and stereotypical tropes, where as I said in this part of my notes, it's painfully reminiscent of the original series finale, Turnabout Intruder, where an old love interest of Kirk's switches bodies with him because Starfleet doesn't allow for women to be captains. And then at the climax of that episode, Kirk, who really is the old flame in his body, goes nuts and gets emotional. And I just get really attuned to a very certain register when people are talking where it's whiny, and that triggers something in my brain because, again, autistic spectrum, you think in pictures. There's very specific things that register in that episode, and I see things in body language and stuff like that that's played out here, and ooh, goodness sakes. I get the vibe that the elected one with Riker is like I got a Harvey Weinstein vibe.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put it that way. I got a Harvey Weinstein vibe. And they don't discuss much more beyond that. It happens. They don't. As you said, I think the B plot's a lot more interesting than what we have here. It's kind of disposable here.
Okay, I don't want to labor too much on this, but in your analogy, who is Weinstein?
Okay,
the elected one or Riker?
Based on the evidence of the fact that the elected one wants to see Riker, and she sends him an extremely revealing outfit that says, "I will not see you unless you wear this."
Yeah.
The elected one is Weinstein. Based off of that perspective, yes.
Okay, do you think it's diplomatically appropriate to wear indigenous garb? I was wondering, was that part of the things we should put under enlightened Trek, or would it be maybe there's nothing approximate in our own culture and time that is equivalent? Maybe I don't know. What do you think about that?
There's a line in the script where he defends wearing the revealing costume, saying,
"That's why I want to." Yeah, exactly.
I wore XYZ costume on XYZ planet, and I was fine.
Furs somewhere, yes.
Furs and feathers and da 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 da. So, from its own attempt, it's a when in Rome, do as Romans do kind of mentality, and I guess that makes them more enlightened than looking down on them, saying these people, they're so antiquated because they have their people dressed like this. So when in Rome,
they don't run around in pajamas.
Right. They don't run around in pajamas and have a color scheme based off of the color beige.
Exactly.
So that's my deal there. It's one of those, if given those options, I'm okay with them doing the when in Rome, do as Romans do thing. That's how I rate it up. Go ahead.
Okay, can I two more things about what doesn't work in this? Is that cool? One is a teaching point. Actually, both of them are. Okay, this is a lesson in tone. When I'm trying to explain tone to young people in literature, you think about tone in like your own voice. If you raise your voice or if you change in your own tone, but really tone is like how you're supposed to feel based on the presentation of the art, right? And this is all over the place. It's cringy romance. There's that tone. It's medical mystery. It's tense diplomatic negotiation. It's stay the execution at the last second. It's all over the place. I don't know how to feel, and it just feels like I wrote whiplash, all over the place. I just don't know, and then they're cracking jokes at the end about Picard's voice. It is wild and all over the place.
Well, that's a testament of the production. They didn't have a script.
Absolutely. Then that is a pass that you get in revision, right? And if you're shooting with the script, you're going scene by scene and whatever you can get out of the actors in the last second, that kind of makes sense. But in that revision process, I feel like that's where you really try to comb over your script to make sure the tone really, works and is consistent. Okay. And last part, I want to talk, I was thinking, like, why is the scene with Riker, and I believe her name is Beata? It's kind of like Beta, but
Beata.
Spelled I'm not Beata, something like that. Okay, so why does that seem so cringy? I really want to sit down and think about that. And I'm not thinking about it from kind of kind of the seductress point of view. I'm just thinking about it from like two characters in a relationship point of view. And why does that feel cringy? And I'm thinking it's from a literary perspective, it's unearned. Okay. So, in life, yeah, true, people get into relationships quickly. It happens. However, as Nalo Hopkinson, one of my favorite science fiction writers, reminds us that literature is a moral art and that we have to believe our characters are earning what they're getting. And that in a
Yeah,
type of relationship where two people, come together intimately, that should be earned. That should be like the climax of a story, so to speak, or set up a little bit more and not just dropped on you, because that's when it feels cringy, when it doesn't feel unearned, when it feels rushed, when it feels out of left field, because we don't have that earning of it. And it also feels like you said, Riker doesn't even want it. So yeah,
yeah,
it's cringy for many reasons, but I wanted to bring up the whole why kind of in general do sometimes on-screen kisses in relationships feel cringy. And in this context, we only get 45 minutes. And when we set it up in the middle of the episode, that's just not nearly enough time to make a legitimate feel. See Vosh and Picard and Captain's
oh,
Holiday as a counter example of how to actually do an on-screen relationship. I'll just say that.
and earning that on-screen relationship and earning the
Exactly.
romance there. Definitely agree
Exactly.
there. So that's given the behind the scenes drama on this episode really overshadows how I view it, because it's all over the place. It's written by people. The genesis of the idea came from two men, one of which had, on the one hand, very progressive views in some aspects on gender, and on the other hand, the exact opposite of that. So that's my perspective on all this. So with that said, should we get to first and awards?
Absolutely. I can't wait to see what the award is for this one. What do you
So
have for us for firsts and facts?
so Maurice Hurley has talked about this, and he hates this episode. He will defend Code of Honor before he
Oh,
defends this one. Yes,
oh,
he liked Code of Honor. He calls it
bold.
a good concept done bad, to paraphrase, in the sense that the
Hmm.
central plot is finding a creative way to off an antagonist's wife. He maintains that Code of Honor is better than this episode. I'm not sure I'll go that far, but they're on the same
Oh.
page. Let's go it that way. But he calls it terrible, just terrible. One of the episodes you just as soon erase. Okay, we're through
Yeah.
this episode, and we're probably not going to mention it again. I don't know. Maybe there's another place where it's appropriate. My award here is the Picard Facepalm Award, given to highlighting an embarrassing detail of an episode, and the whole perfume thing, and to a certain extent, the clothing thing at the end. Total facepalm there. Total facepalm, where Data is like, oh, why perfume? Okay,
You got all of Wikipedia in your head, Data.
exactly.
Google it.
Exactly. I know what they're going for. Not to contradict myself, I know what they're going for, but
Yes,
at the
absolutely.
same time, yeah, there's definitely that. So you have awards for this too, ScholarBeta?
Do we have matte paintings again? Remember matte paintings? They went away for so many episodes, and we have a beauty of one. Check out the surface of Angel One at day and at night. This is going to be reused like 10 times in
Mm,
Voyager, in it might even get Deep Space Nine. It's coming back in TNG at least like 3 more times. It comes back in one of my favorite episodes, First Contact.
oh yeah.
The episode, not the film. I love this matte painting. Great. It's beautiful. There's nothing, and I love it at night as much as the daytime version. It's beautiful. So shout out to that matte painting. We're gonna see it plenty of times again. I'm gonna bring it up again.
Oh, that's how
Um,
there you go.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so and then the Enterprise interior. I was trying to not be redundant and hit something that we've already gone over or seen. So for this one, this was kind of a stretch, because basically it's the stuff that takes place on the Enterprise is all kind of bottle episode stuff because they couldn't really build any other sets for the Enterprise. So I'm going this week with the Turbo Lift because A, the turbo lift's amazing, and B, it sets up the pie in the face gag snowball thing, which basically is how Picard gets the virus, question mark. That's tough. So turbo lift's awesome. I really wanted to put it in the last episode, the turbo lift, because I love when Lore says emergency close and then fights Worf on the turbo lift. But I already had so many good interiors, I had to keep it for this one. So there they are, my friends. The Surface of Angel 1 and the Enterprise D's turbo lift.
Wonderful. Are we ready for beam out?
I believe we are.
Wonderful. Let's energize. All right. Are you ready for the third?
That's right. That brings us to our last episode for today, of course. That is episode 15, 11001001, taking place on stardate. Here's some more numbers. 41365.9.
Bravo.
Okay, so what's going on in this one? What's happening here? The Enterprise docks at Starbase 74, which is definitely not a reused prop from a movie. But anyways, the Enterprise docks at Starbase 74 for upgrades and repairs. A mysterious species known as the Binars assists in the work, only to later hijack the Enterprise, taking it back to their home world of Binus. So what genre are we getting into with this episode? This is kind of like a mystery heist, is kind of what I feel like the general dressing is. There's the heist, as in the Binars very slowly taking over the ship, and then actually succeeding there. And, the mystery aspect of why did they do it and all that good stuff is solved by the end. So this uses a ton of tropes, both from science fiction and, of course, anytime we get a holodeck scene, we're going to get tropes in that too. So we get an auto-destruct countdown. We get a call to abandon ship. We get a call back to the last holodeck episode where my guy, the literary and historian Waylon, was shot in the gut and almost died on the holodeck. And then we have a woman in the red dress. We have discussion of EMP knocking out like the Binars computer system. And we have the discussion of biological computer interface, probably for one of the first times here. We'll get that with the Borg later, but with the Binars all linking up to their mother computer back home. So, Captain Kanaka, let's talk. What's going on behind the scenes in this one? What do we know about its production and development?
You said biological computer interface, and my inner adolescent started chuckling a little bit because that plays a role into one of the awards this episode's getting. Anyhow, awesome. Yes, this episode was originally supposed to be released before Big Goodbye. There's even a line in the Big Goodbye about the upgrades to the holodeck happening.
Oh.
Yeah, but it's interesting because there's more references to Big Goodbye in this episode and how it's very clearly the aftermath of Big Goodbye.
Yeah.
But that's the behind the scenes that I have here. Really nothing earth-shattering there in terms of details, but pretty good. In terms of deep cuts, do we want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think it's time. Let's get into it. Why don't you lead us off? What's working in this piece for you?
So in your genre, you talk about mystery and heist. I would actually venture another possible genre and say buddy cop to a certain extent.
Nice. Yeah, break it down.
Kind of a buddy cop between Picard and Riker. They're both Picard and Riker have to work together and risk their lives to solve the problem. They have discussions as to how do we beam on the bridge when we can't get on the bridge. You know, that's kind of buddy cop adjacent banter where it's like you go this way, I go that way. We'll see each other on the other side. I kind of get a vibe from that.
Yeah.
To a lesser degree, it's a character study because these characters are more or less on shore leave, at least for the first half of the episode.
Absolutely.
So time is dedicated, which doesn't necessarily help the plot, but it helps inform the characters, where you see what each person does on their when they're not on active duty. Picard says he's going to read a book in his quarters.
Wow, how exciting!
Yeah, woo, go you. Riker tries the holodeck, doing something he likes. Worf and Yar play Parisi squares. You take a glimpse at Worf's super type A Klingon personality, and it comes through on full display. The line, "If winning isn't important, then why keep score?"
Facts.
Yeah, that was. Whew.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Data paints and LaForge attempts to teach him. Riker shows off a sense of humor with his blind man teaching an android to paint must be worth a few pages in somebody's book. I
Yeah, that
love
was
that
pretty
line.
flippant, wasn't it? Yeah, that's great.
It's good. It's good humor. Riker doesn't. His humor and himself as a character doesn't. It comes into fuller focus here in this episode, and I definitely like that. Speaking of things that don't, in this case, something doesn't age well. Dr. Crusher is very motivated by her time,
Oh yeah,
career motivated.
I wrote that down too.
Obsesses over talking medical theories with Dr. Epstein.
Oops.
Yeah, well, they didn't know, but still.
Yeah, that of course.
Historical hindsight there. Riker likes to play jazz and has an affinity for 1950s Americana culture. There's a lot to unpack there. He goes to Bourbon Street in New Orleans, and you got a lot to talk about, Commander Riker, ScholarBeta. So make it so.
Yeah, let's just pause for this. Yeah, to talk about Riker, because obviously the holodeck part is all about him. It really is about his character. We do learn some really cool things. First thing I just want to point out is that he calls for 1958 KC, Kansas City first. And I thought, all right, my hometown getting a shout out. Nope. We're not going to 18th and Vine, which is the historical jazz district in Kansas City. We're not doing that. We're going to New Orleans at 2 a.m., which you got to admit is also pretty freaking cool. New Orleans might have something there, who can say? Okay, yeah, we get some kind of surface characterization. Riker plays the trombone. Great. Okay, that's established. Now we have that kind of, exterior thing going. Then we get kind of a deeper conversation with him and Minuet. Your work's very important to you, she says, the woman in the red dress. And then Riker responds, "It is me. It's what I am." So yeah, okay. And that kind of keeps in that characterization with, Troy telling him in our discussion last week about, oh, you want to be a Starfleet captain. It's your whole motivation. So we're really kind of doubling down on that. Okay, so some metaphors that I was reading into maybe a little too much. I'm really interested in, musical terminology. So minuet, kind of a slow, formal 18th century dance. It's kind of the opposite of jazz, and not opposite, but it's very different than jazz. And it's kind of an interesting contrast for Riker. Think of Riker as kind of an ensemble man, a jazz man. He works with a crew, with a band. There's some improvisation that has to go on in your role as a Starfleet officer, and that's what makes you kind of brilliant and makes or breaks your career, like a Picard maneuver. Whereas Minuet is a partner dance, something that Riker just isn't into right now, a la his kind of conflicted relationship with Troy. So that's kind of what I read into there. I thought that was kind of interesting.
That is genius. I had always wondered that because I knew the reference. I didn't know it was the specific reference, but I know minuet was a dance, a musical term. But that is phenomenal that you brought that up.
Hey,
brilliant.
English majors out there, you read enough, you study enough terminology, you can make whatever metaphor work that you want. Anyways, okay, I want to talk about one more thing with this, and I think this kind of gets into criticism later, so I'll keep it brief. The scene does unfortunately get overlong when Picard enters. That's the only bad part, I would say. I love everything that we learn about Riker, his motivation, about Minuet, about the holodeck upgrades. I like how they sometimes marvel. They treat Minuet as real, and then they talk about her as though she's just a hologram. I like all of that. I just think that Picard does make it a bit overlong, which is interesting. And okay, one other thing I was thinking about too was that this might be a little metaphor too. The Binars connect their entire lives to like a mother central home computer. And for a minute, Riker got to realize just how powerful, emotional, evocative, convincing, computer interface is. It's not like brain computer interface. It's more like holographic computer human interface. But I kind of like that too. We really got to see, really powerful technology at work. And I don't know. I just thought that was kind of cool as well, and a connection to the Barnar. But what else are you thinking about this episode? Yeah, I wanted to break and talk a lot about Riker, but what else are you thinking in terms of, like characterization and such?
So all these little character scenes probably run about 3 minutes each, but it informs their character in such a brilliant and endearing way, which
Yeah.
is something that New Trek sorely lacks. Um, just immensely. You need little quirks like that. And you and I kind of have the same perspective on the Binar, so I'm just gonna give this a shove, and then we'll see where it
Yeah.
goes from there. Um, when I was watching this yesterday, in my half comatose state because of this week,
Mm.
two words came into my mind, two phrases rather: benevolent Borg
Yep.
and primitive Borg, because
Yeah.
in both cases they are integrated between organic material and technology. But the difference between the Binars and the Borg is the Binars use it for generally positive effect, not conquest, but improving what already exists. The Borg definitely don't. So, what
Yes.
are your thoughts on that, Scholar Beta?
I want to say right here, the Binars are pure awesome. They're my favorite alien that we've run into thus far. I'm thinking of like kind of some. What are the kind of we've seen some with Lonely Among Us. Wasn't really impressed by the snake and the dog aliens. We saw the Traveler, and I hated his puffy hands, and I'm really sorry to keep bringing that up, but it's just, when my eye catches something in set design that I don't like, I'm gonna whine about it on a podcast.
Naturally.
Anyways, so to be their look, I love their look. I
Mhm.
honestly do. I love that they're in pairs. I love their backstory. I just think it's pure awesome from costume to concept is what I put in my notes. Just very cool. And I'm getting a lot of Borg precursor vibes. So, and something I like to think about, dang, what a cool story or movie that would be. Imagine the stages of Binar civilization before they all linked up to the mother computer. Do you think that was a peaceful transfer and process? Do you think there was revolution? Do you think people were
Mm.
forced into it and then overthrew and made it benevolent? You know what I'm saying? Like, I just think there's some fascinating things there. I don't think
Oh
the
yeah.
Barnard's ever come back. But if I were writing a Star Trek TV series, I would definitely put Binars maybe at the con and the helm or something like that, because I just love them so much. I think they're great. I think they're a great concept. There's a one last thing. There's a quote where the Binars say that their transformation to be reliant on the mother computer or everyone linked up to it, quote, happened over a long period of time, quote, and there were a few disadvantages. And that's all we get. Wesley's like, wow, there must be so many advantages. They're like, well, there's a few disadvantages. Well, we're going to find out about a big one at the end of the episode. Yeah, what's up, my friend?
So I have a theory. People
Yeah.
use technology, and this is the general vibe I got from the Binars back when I saw it. They use technology and they use technology, and they got to the point, and part of this is because I'm reading Dr. Michio Kaku's book, The Physics of the Future.
Whoa.
They found the use for technology, and then they realized that if they tinkered with their own biology and augment it with the technology, they can go better. So while the peaceful transition or the revolution are really fascinating concepts there, maybe it's more of a practical and pragmatic issue where
Yeah.
over time they augmented themselves, and because of computers and because we're talking about 1980s computer technology here where everything's binary, they weren't even at the quantum realm yet. um, that's the vibe I got from them, where they kept using technology like us, constantly using social media and stuff like that, to the point where it was, hey, why do we have hands when we can just plug something in and we can communicate that way? Why do we talk when we can send a lot more when we basically put Facebook in our brain? Yes, Scholar Beta.
And yeah, you're absolutely right. I think something that's cool right now to think about with this episode is our society actually really does live online right now because of this pandemic. We're
Oh
teaching
yeah.
online, we're buying online, which we would have had already been doing. We're conferencing online.
We're making podcasts
basically
online.
exactly. It all lives a ton of our civilization, our society lives online. Yet, what's terrifying about that is that we really don't have any control over that world or any democratic stake in how online works. That's currently a aristocracy of Facebook, Microsoft, Verizon. And that to me is when I thought about that, I thought, dang, that's terrifying that they own the mother computer, so to speak. And it's their decision making on how what the mother computer does, because the people that are making our laws in the Senate and the House of Representatives don't have any idea how mother computer works.
Nope.
They have no idea. So I just think what's really fascinating is, yeah, there's definitely some parallels to what's going on right now. But when I look at what kind of how we're going, to me, that's dystopia. And how the Binars, evidently, they pulled out some type of utopia almost, I'm assuming, but I like going your route where it just made sense to augment and keep building and adding. And there must have been some trust and process in there, and then, yeah, over a long time, boom, that's where we ended up. It wasn't like an overnight revolution kind of thing. So I like that interpretation a lot that you brought up.
There you go. So would you like to talk about what doesn't work in this episode?
Yeah, let's pick up where we left off. We're talking about what's going on with the binars. So to break it back down again, we're at Starbase 74. We're getting this retrofit, and then all of a sudden, there's a containment breach. Dun, dun, dun. And so we have to evacuate the Enterprise, and we have to undock the ship, get it far away because it's going to blow up. And then all of a sudden, it doesn't. And we find out that, that was just kind of simulated by the Binars because they need to hijack the Enterprise because the Enterprise is the largest flash drive in the galaxy. You know what I'm saying? That's really what it sounded like to me. And it's the only flash drive in the galaxy that can download all of the mother computer, central computer, whatever we're calling it now. And to me, I think Riker brings this up, why didn't you just ask for our help? That part is a little convoluted to me, It's a little convoluted that they needed two people to solve this problem. I think you mentioned this, yet Picard just accidentally gets caught up in this situation. So, yeah, that part is a little rushed, but to me, the Binar are so cool. I overlook that. I give that 1 millisecond of thought and think, tough. I wish that could have been different, but a hijack heist is pretty cool, so I'm going with it. But so that's kind of quasi in the middle of what works, what doesn't. What's your thinking on that?
So much like Datalore, there are certain story elements and plot devices which if you take a look at them at face value, it's serviceable to the story. But if you really scrutinize them, it causes the episode to buckle, but not necessarily collapse. So somehow Minuet, this hologram, knows Riker when she shouldn't even know these sorts of details about Riker, even given the Binar's exceptional programming skills. There are certain aspects, certain insights into Riker's psyche, which she shouldn't know.
Can you give me an example of one? What are you thinking?
Well, so your work is very important to you.
Yeah. How did she know that?
And you're dealing with species, talking about the whole the Binars, the convoluted. They had to steal the ship to accomplish their mission, and their answer, going back to the definition of binary, is it's either this or it's not.
Yeah.
And your work is very important to you, implies a level of nuance, which I accept if you're dealing with some sort of psychic species designing a program. But the Binars clearly aren't. They reason in a binary way. And the fact that Minuet has that kind of ability to tell nuance and subtle stuff, again, if you don't think too much into it, it works. Just like with Datalore, the up to scrutiny, again, not really bad, but just something that I think is worth mentioning.
Yeah, that is interesting.
After the Enterprise leaves the starbase under Binar control, the computer gives an expository dump in a way that doesn't act like computers do in Star Trek. The computer actually becomes a human and is able to answer things and a yes or no and be able to use intuition to a certain degree, where I was anticipating, because I take a look at how Star Trek handles things, and when somebody asks a rhetorical question, usually, or things that require a less concrete way of looking at things, computers will crash and go, I'm not authorized, or that's an invalid entry and stuff like that. And there's a little bit of Picard asking questions that a human can answer, but a computer, as established in Star Trek, may struggle with, and the computer is able to issue it because answer the question with relative ease because, and Maurice Hurley wrote this episode because this serves the purpose of giving exposition out, and internal consistency is not as important. Again, really small. But it's worth mentioning. Also, oh, you have something here. If you want to take it about the hijacking.
So okay, I was thinking, I'm sorry, my brain kind of went back to the minuet part. Can we talk about that for 1 second again?
Go ahead.
So like on the one hand, I guess I read minuet as either giving a kind of canned response, your work is very important to you. Like we as the audience know that is true for Riker because we've watched, 14 episodes up to this point. So at first I thought that was just kind of a generic, algorithmic response, pivoting conversation to personal, pulling up this, let's see if this works. And it happened to work, Then I thought, oh, maybe actually not. Maybe this is Binar technology where they can now on the holodeck have the computer read their mind or interface with their memories or mind somehow in order to make it as real and believable as possible. Okay. So I was kind of, that's what I was trying to figure out, like, to what degree are the Binar's upgrade responsible for this? And because Minuet kind of is like what's the word? I was about to say fountainhead, but that's not even close. It's, she's like the mouth or the representative or the ambassador of the Binars, and like explains things to Picard and Riker later. So maybe, they programmed her specifically, or I'm not really sure. That's kind of ambiguous. So I just want to kind of roll back to that. The only thing I was thinking, sorry. So that's happened. And then right after, we meet Minuet and all that, the Enterprise is hijacked. And to me, it really does kind of feel like it goes out of nowhere. It comes out of nowhere. I'm wondering if that could have been telegraphed a little bit more. Like, could Troy have picked up on something? Could Data? Yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
I kind of got the vibe that it was telegraphed at the end of the first act, where you have Wesley looking at the Binar suspiciously while they dismantle the isolinear chips in the computer. And there's a little sting. I kind of got the vibe that it was sufficiently telegraphed.
Interesting.
A red herring. There's a lot of red herrings in this episode where I think he looks at them and he's curious, and then you have the suspenseful music, then the credits, then the next time you see Wesley Crusher, that suspicion is replaced with curiosity. And it's meant to throw you off. But I got the vibe that right at the end of the first act break, they were up to something.
Yeah, you're right. And it definitely I definitely think it's telegraphed that there's some nefarious purpose. They're up to something, but specifically a hijacking or specifically dumping memory. I don't know. I just was kind of curious about that. I honestly think it's the pacing in the holodeck. If they could have intercut that with a little bit of something else and broken that up a bit, or figured out a way to actually involve Picard a little more organically into that scene. Because a lot of what happens on the holodeck, their discussion of how real, we already got that, we already got that stuff from The Big Goodbye. So I don't know. I just, the pacing there just throws that off to a degree where I just like, dang, man, this feels like a total shift. Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
And that kind of gives back to the credence where this episode was supposed to precede the Big Goodbye.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back into that. So maybe the early version of the script was written before Big Goodbye, where you were supposed to explore that. So while I was talking about red herrings, there's the red herring with Wesley Crusher, where he kind of looks at them suspiciously, incredulously. And then you have another red herring, which I'm going to argue is a straight up bait and switch, where Picard and Riker have to go up to the bridge, and they can't. All the turbo lifts are shut down, which significantly implies that the Binars are up to no good.
Exactly.
From a storytelling standpoint, it's exciting, but it's a bait and switch because they go into the transporter, they're expecting armed conflict. Then they beam up and they're all incapacitated. If they are all incapacitated, you would think not only would they activate the turbo lifts and keep the turbo lifts active, they might even try to tinker something with the transporter to
Yeah, exactly.
bring Picard and Riker up there. Again, works for the story in a suspense, ooh, what's it going to be, red herring sort of way, but it's a bait and switch. Also, if you were to do something, and this ties into my next one, it's clear that they built the holodeck program to snare Riker, but not Picard. And
Yes.
Picard being involved in this plot was a happenstance. But on the flip side, they need not only Riker, but also Picard to reboot the computer as a contingency. So couldn't you have just spared a couple minutes in which Picard can't get out of his quarters? He wants to go talk to Beverly Crusher, tries to hail her, he can't. He tries to leave his quarters, he can't. As far as the central computer is concerned, he's not on the ship. Everybody evacuates, he pries it open, still gets to talk to Minuet and is impressed by the fact that she can speak French. But
and see, that's a great idea, because that breaks up that holodeck scene with the pacing that we were talking about. And so you maybe in his quarters when he's reading a book, he could be annoyed by a Bynard jumping in, and there's like that electronic system behind his desk. Maybe the Bynard is tinkering with that a little bit, and that's how he gets locked in his quarters for a second until he needs to be released when the Enterprise leaves. So I think that's pretty that's a great idea. And again, just a little, one or two more shots could have broken up that scene a little bit. But still, these are very small things, like we mentioned earlier. Still, I don't think any of these necessarily takes away my interest in the Bynars, their civilization, or the coolness of the Enterprise getting hijacked.
As I said, it makes the episode exciting, but when you think too hard about it, and you could do that with anything, as long as the narrative is interesting and things make generally logical sense, and in the context of this episode it does, it's great. I mean, you could apply the same logic to great works of science fiction and great works of cinema like Star Wars and stuff like that, where if they had done this, but it doesn't matter when you nitpick the plot, because the emotional and entertainment value is there, so you don't read too much into the other.
Just to test out this idea, like, remember we talked about earning things? The moral art. This, to me, honestly, does feel like they earn things, because they figure out the ruse presented by Minuet. You said, they have the buddy cop aspects of working together to figure out how to retake the bridge. They're tricked in a pretty significant way, and even Data's tricked, and that feels like, oh man, that's a try-fail cycle right there. That feels very real and legitimate when you're tricking Data and succeeding in that regard. So to be honest, where this one succeeds, it's because these people actually earn these moments, so there can be these little plot holes, but the characters are still within character. They're still within pretty good logic within the world of Star Trek. And I just, again, nitpicks, but important to bring up for the sake of conversation of Star Trek.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I definitely agree with you that this is all earned. Should we get into first and facts?
Let's do it.
Wonderful. So the song Riker plays on the trombone during the holodeck scene is something called The Nearness of You, which is played once more when Riker re-enters the holodeck at the end of the episode, when Minuet, as he knows her, disappears. We talked about, how people keep track of things, how the writers keep track of things. Many seasons later in Conundrum, where Riker's memory is erased, he finds a trombone and plays the first couple notes of that song as he tries to remember who he is. So again, internal continuity is super important there. I wouldn't have thought about that. Hit it.
Yeah, and Minuet comes back too in that episode, Future Imperfect. So this seeds a couple things from Riker. And Minuet, you got to understand where she comes from in this episode for that reveal in Future Imperfect to make the most amount of sense. Great catch with both the song, that's very subtle, and then coming back, awesome. And then that connection to Conundrum, another favorite episode of mine. Commander McDuff, where do you come from? What are you doing on the bridge, Commander McDuff? I've never seen you before. Yeah.
One of these things is not like the other.
Exactly.
So also the song "I Remember You" is heard in the background during the Picard and Riker scenes in the holodeck, and that song is also played in Star
Hmm.
Trek 3, the Search for Spock, where it's in the space bar where McCoy tries to get a drink and also charter a space flight. They play that song again. So interesting little reference there.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
so in terms of episode awards, the Picard Facepalm Award. So this is one, as indicated earlier, which is given to an embarrassing detail of an episode. There
Yeah.
is a lot of extremely potent sexual tension between Riker and Minuet, which opens up a lot of really strange existential questions about holograms. A
Yes.
lot of awkward conversations, a lot of jokes about holographic rights. I'm just going to leave it at that. You can dig as deeply into that as you'd like to get Freudian about it, but that's my little face palm. There is one of those when I was. There we go, almost out of time there. So that whole scene where he goes, "How far could this go?" It's just like, ooh, yeah, please
Yeah.
don't. This is primetime television in 1987, so there you go. But I'm
I mean,
sure,
we just had Data and Tasha Yar, a mere
yeah,
12 episodes prior? No, 14 episodes ago or something like that. So yeah. Yeah. Interesting. All right, can we
very
do
interesting.
some interiors and matte paintings?
Let's hit it, and we're past beam out. So make it so.
Excellent. Okay, so here we go. We have back-to-back matte paintings, my friends. This is very exciting. This matte is Starbase 74, the Enterprise docking, and that happens to also be our first Enterprise interior. So we got this awesome matte painting. You never see the Enterprise dock, and we never see people physically actually leave the Enterprise. That's always by shuttlecraft or by beaming. So that's really interesting. So I love that matte painting. Looks great, beautiful Blu-ray, but also looks really great on DVD as well. So
Oh
again,
yeah,
as I was saying, the interior I want to look at. I got a couple. First one is the airlock itself from the Enterprise side. There you got the hatch, and then you actually have the Binars coming through, and Picard and Riker welcoming them. And then the only other thing I want to say with interiors in this episode has a ton of shots of the hallway and the
mm,
corridors. So many. Like when they're abandoning ship, they just put that camera and they follow people around those hallways. When Riker and Picard are realizing it's abandoned, they just walk around in the hallways and realize nobody's there. So I just want to highlight the corridors and interiors, which is on the same stage as the battle bridge that I brought up in episode 1 of our podcast. So yeah, love those interiors, love what they look like, and I especially love the weapons room. We don't get to see it, but we get to see the door. So you had no idea there was a weapons room on the Enterprise, at least I didn't, and now I
oh
do,
yeah.
and there it is.
That's all good stuff there. The big old, the ominous sign that says weapons room is one of my favorites of this episode.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
especially considering, I wonder how Roddenberry would have reacted to that, because
Yeah.
he was the one who said there's no military in the 24th century, which kind of breaks the entire Star Trek concept. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
interesting to see how he would have reacted to that. So we're wrapping up our episode here. Next time on Captain's Yacht, we have Too Short a Season, When the Bow Breaks, and Home Soil. We'll be reviewing those 3 episodes coming up, and we got big thank yous as we head back and finish up our episode here. So let's talk thank yous, ScholarBeta.
As always, want to shout out Memory Alpha, helped me name check and find out Riker's brief love interest in the episode. Angel One, thank you for that. Also want to shout out Trek Core. Love reading those scripts. I have no idea how y'all got those, but those are great. Love reading those. Taking a look at the screen caps, comparing the Blu-ray with the DVD. Someday I'm gonna get a big payday and I'll be able to afford those Blu-rays, but not today. Not during the pandemic, that's for sure.
No, that's great.
And of course, biggest shout out, biggest thank you is to everyone listening, folks commenting, and just those who love Star Trek. Want to shout you out. It's that community that put together Memory Alpha, that maintains Trek Core, and fuels the captain and I to do this week in and week out.
Thank you so much for everything on that, folks. Also, mahalo nui loa to our listeners again. And if you like what you're seeing here, please feel free to comment, like, share, and subscribe, please. So with that in mind, I think we're wrapping it up today. Live long and prosper. E malama pono. You all take care.
Peace and long life, everyone.
Thank you.